what I wanted to do is go to college and play football. Totally different for the NFL. I had no clue I was going to go to it. I didn't believe, I didn't have a dream. I never really had anything about the NFL, but going to Iowa was a big deal. The three big schools that actually offered me scholarships, number one was Iowa, Missouri, and then believe it or not, Oregon. I don't know where the hell that one came out of. I didn't even know there was a state named Oregon. I was like one of those New York reporters. I had no clue where the hell Oregon was. I said, there's no way I'm going to go over there. I was a homebody. We hardly ever went out of the county of Dubuque, where Dyersville is located, much less the state of Iowa. And it was a no-brainer to go to the University of Iowa.
Welcome to the Gallery and Hurley Unfiltered podcast, Iowa Football Rewind.
Subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast player to get a behind-the-scenes look that you won't find anywhere else.
In this episode, you will get the real story behind a career that didn't read like a Hollywood movie script. We talked to Mike Haight, former Iowa tight end and offensive lineman. The former first-round pick and 7-year NFL vet opens up about how his years under Hayden Fry were the best of his life, and how Kirk Ferentz taught him lessons that allowed him to have success in the NFL. He talks about the inside tricks needed to get the edge against premier pass rushers of the time like Bruce Smith and Reggie White. Join us as we deep dive into his journey. We were saying like the different size of the linemen back then.
Yeah, we're talking the middle of the 80s. I weighed about 275 when I was at University of Iowa as a right tackle. When I got drafted, the person I replaced was a all-pro who they basically got rid of, Marvin Powell, if you ever heard of him. I think it was either UCLA or USC, but he was like 7-time all-pro. But I found out a year or so after that he was also the president of the NFLPA, the Players Association Union. And if you are familiar with those back years, in 87, we went on strike. They got rid of him because they knew the strike was coming up and he'd be one less person to deal with. And I got drafted, took his spot, and to top it off, they gave me his number 79. I was a rookie with no friends because I took the president of the union's position and his number. My first year I got hurt. My right knee hyperextended, torn meniscus. I was literally the only rookie on the team. I didn't have any playmates to play with because no one would talk to me because I was taking one of their best friends' number. So if you can imagine, in a town of 8 million people and all those fine rags that you would read back then, New York Times, all those big ones. And my name is usually on the front page, and it wasn't in a good article, by the way. So my NFL experience was not what I would call golden. When you mentioned the Hawkeyes on the other end, that was the experience of a lifetime. I'll never forget every single moment. And then, of course, I got married the summer before our senior year that we went to the Rose Bowl. And then we also went 10-2 that year. So I was actually married and had about $10 in the bank account at that time. So getting drafted in the NFL gave me a little bit of cash, but again, back then the monies weren't quite as good as it is in today's world.
What was your mindset going in? Like, you came from a really successful Iowa team, you got drafted highly, the world seemed to be going well at some point, and then I think, like you said, things changed a little bit.
Naturally, no one knows anything about the Midwest. The Midwest actually would go from New Jersey all the way to the Rocky Mountains. There is nothing in between, maybe a little town called Chicago. I got asked what suburb I lived in of Chicago. Is Iowa actually a part of Wisconsin? How big is my farm? Now, your farm, you grow potatoes, right? These people absolutely had no clue about anything. I don't know if any of them went to school to even know what the hell they were talking about. And I'm talking about sportscasters primarily because they clearly didn't know anything about geography or history about Iowa, or even that Iowa was a true state within the 50 states. It's really weird.
And the Jets are in Hempstead, right?
They were at that time. They're now over in Jersey. They're at a brand new stadium that they actually share with the Giants, which at that time when I was playing, we were also sharing the same stadium, but we were located out in Long Island, Hempstead, like you just said. And that was probably about a 3 hour ride to get to the stadium, probably the night before. And then, of course, after the game, it usually took 2 or 3 hours to get home. It was so far away. But we usually stayed right in Jersey, probably about a half hour away from the stadium there. And that stadium's totally gone, along with the remains of the famous, I'm trying to remember what his name is now, that supposedly the mob buried him in the end zone.
Jimmy Hoffa?
That's exactly who it was. He was
Right.
supposedly buried in the end zone of that particular stadium.
Yeah, I heard that too when I was
If
at
it's
the
true,
Giants.
it makes for a good talk.
There's 50 miles of swamp. They could have just thrown him in the ditch there.
Pretty
A big
much.
swamp near there.
They said they built a stadium on the swamp, and it was actually a garbage dump. And they also said it was probably one of the first places that they put nuclear waste in as well. Luckily, we weren't there every day, just game day.
That's a really unique situation within the NFL, right? I don't think there's any other teams that really do that or didn't do that at that time.
No, we were really the only ones that had to travel. The only one that I remember that had some sort of different arrangement was maybe the Packers, because sometimes they would play in Green Bay, and then sometimes they were playing, what was the other place? And then,
Milwaukee.
yes, Milwaukee. And then another place they used to like playing at was at Madison. We actually played a couple games there, which was really
Wow.
weird. And those are about the only times my family ever got to see us play, because we hardly played anybody in the Midwest ever. It's either East Coast or West Coast. And back then we didn't have the cable. They were just starting, I think, in 1987 when the strike came up. They were just starting to do the pay-per-view. They were planning on getting rich big time by having to charge $100 for each game, and that was going to go worldwide. And of course, players aren't going to get any of that because they don't own the rights to anything. You don't even own the rights to a logo. You don't own your own rights to your own name, practically.
Can you go back on and talk about the USFL, about getting drafted and then how that fell apart?
I've had a few people ask me about the USFL, and I responded usually saying, do you happen to know who the very last first round pick was for the first rounders of that particular year? Because it ended in 86. And let's see, was it Bo, the famous running back? Do you know Bo and all that sort of thing? But no, it was a lowly offensive lineman named Mike Haight was the number one pick for that year. And unfortunately, right after that, the USFL crumbled, and they were actually in the middle of a big lawsuit with the NFL for a monopoly, because they wouldn't allow anybody else to have a league in competition or any of that kind of stuff. And guess what? The USFL actually won the lawsuit. Guess how much money they made?
And I'd heard the $1 thing before.
It was $1. But if you know anything about monopoly, they usually triple the damages. So they won a total of $3. Boom, that league was done.
The salaries were affected prior to that, like it was driving up salaries for NFL
Oh, big
players
time.
before that.
Big. There's lots of big names that actually went into the USFL and played first there, and it raised the salaries. Maybe people who were making $150,000 a year, but when they got involved, then it suddenly doubled up to a grand total of $300,000. Which, again, when you look at coming from Iowa, 100,000 is a lot of money, but 300,000 is a ton. And so that was a great deal. But after the USFL folded, it all went right back down to where it was. And since then, there's been multiple strikes and renegotiations of the players' union and all that sort of thing with the NFL owners. They're getting a piece of the pie, they're getting a piece of everything. But that didn't start until about 93, and I was done in 92. There's guys that have been playing in the NFL since, God, in the 60s, 70s, all the way to today. And now they get huge pieces of the pie, not only from TV, but their likeness. I believe they actually get pieces of the trading cards. That's how they made their money big time, is they owned everything, including their likeness. And to see now that college is doing that with their newfound wealth for players. I saw a couple of my old teammates about a month ago were saying, why didn't we have the NIL when we were around to even get a chance at? And I go, guess what? Because that was 40 years ago, maybe. Time changes and things change day to day, and you just got to take what you can get when you're in it. And I'm very fortunate to not only get into the NFL, which I never dreamed that I was. I never thought I was going to. I actually got drafted in the first round at the 22nd pick, went to the New York Jets of all places. That was not high on my list by any means. I was hoping, to be honest, it was going to be Kansas City, maybe somewhere else in the Midwest, like Minnesota Vikings. I think at that time I actually did like Pittsburgh Steelers, mainly because our colors matched theirs. Black and gold would have been awesome. Larry Station got to do that. That's where he went. And he was there for about a year and a half. And then his back totally went out on him. And that's the end of his football career. And he was outstanding. And he's basically a football god. And I still feel that way.
It was awesome.
Where was John Alt compared to you time-wise? Would he have been at Kansas City then?
He was a first rounder. Actually, Coach Ferentz was an offensive lineman coach for us my freshman year, and that would have been 81. That particular year was the beginning of the Kirk Ferentz era at Iowa because he had so many offensive linemen under his tutelage, if you want to say, and your family being affected with that with your brother. Yes, and I was one of those as well. I think Ron Hallstrom was the first one. Brett Miller was another one. He went to, I think, the Atlanta Falcons first, and then he played a lot at San Diego. Joe Lavelle, I think he was in the USFL, and he also played at the Cowboys. A couple people that took advantage of the USFL connection. John Alt was already there, and as John Alt's name is on the stadium, they loved him, and he's a god down there too. He was a outstanding athlete, and I think he has a son playing in the NFL right now, if I remember right.
He plays in San Diego.
We were all hoping that he would come to Iowa. For whatever reason, that didn't happen. But then I think he went to the golden helmeted folks in Indiana.
Little Notre Dame? Yeah.
Yes, good old Notre Dame. Needless to say, I don't think about them that much.
Speaking of Notre Dame, let's go back to high school. You were born in Manchester, which I was
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
And then you went to Dyersville Beckman, correct?
That is correct. We moved to Dyersville after my family was done with the farming situation, which, as you know, a lot of farming is not the bestest idea in the world to become because you work your ends off for a lot of years for literally nothing. And it's just the joy of farming, if you will, no money. Some people are a little bit luckier with whether or not they have the land or they do the crops, or sometimes if they're lucky enough, they'll actually have some animals too. We had dairy cows. Absolutely do not get into the dairy farming. Did you guys have dairy?
Luckily, my dad got out of the livestock right after he took over the farm.
My experience is we had about 40 head of milk cows, and I was the guy who got to shovel the SHIT throughout the barn. And then I also got to carry, usually I think it was about a 5-gallon pail or a 10-gallon, but it was made of aluminum, and I had to carry it the entire length of the barn all the way down to the milk room where you lift it up about 5 feet and pour it into the container where all your milk is stored. Nowadays, or even probably 20, 40 years ago, they ran lines instead of having to physically carry a 5 or 10-gallon pail full of milk. But I learned real early that helping your dad was probably a good thing versus getting yelled at. But after Manchester was all done and over with, we moved to Dyersville. My dad ended up becoming basically what he called it was being a sewer rat. He used to work for a sewer company. They put in sewer systems for cities all throughout the Midwest of Iowa. He'd be gone the entire week, and he'd come back on the weekends to basically hang out, beat up us three kids, me, my sister, and my brother, Dave. And then he was with John Deere for a little while, and that didn't last very long either, as the farming stuff during the mid 80s just went to the tank, and a lot of farmers lost farms and their entire lives went to hell because of that. That was one big thing that the Jets, when I was interviewed, they always wanted to know how big my farm was, if I still had it. Do you have any of the stuff? If your family lost all that kind of stuff, which we were out of it by that time, thank God. But Dyersville, there's a Catholic high school there. Dyersville was probably 100% Catholic at that time. And that was the school to go to if you were living in town. And played football there with practically every boy that was either a senior or a junior would be going out for the team. We had 3, 4, 5 people deep. Nowadays, you hear that they're lucky to even have a team to practice against because there's hardly anybody that goes out anymore. I don't know if that's because of the time we're in or it's not part of the tradition of being in sports.
I think it's a lot of things. I think there's a lot of competition, right? There's a lot of other things that kids can do. Yeah, I think maybe the lure of football isn't there, or the way that it's coached maybe is different. I don't know if kids want to kind of put up with some of those type things. I don't think kids want to do that anymore. And I think it's a question of, yeah, there's probably better techniques and that part of it. I think there's a toughness piece that kind of goes into it. So yeah, I think it's a mix that way. And I think those smaller towns, I grew up 30, 40 minutes from where you went to school. And I think it's the same thing. It's where the jobs are and where the people are. And it's harder and harder. These smaller towns are, I think, starting to dwindle and not just have the economic activity. And it's harder for young people to be like, okay, let's go to Dyersville, let's go to Winthrop, or let's go to Manchester, Independence, any of those little towns. I've seen schools consolidated over the years and those things in our area, at least.
It's hard to raise a family in those environments, number one. A lot of my classmates, I think we had a whole 127 people in my class at Dyersville, but a lot of them had brothers and sisters that were probably anywhere between 6 to 12 people in their family. Way different now, where most of these families, you're lucky to have one or two. And if they get one of each, they're definitely not going to go for three. The number of people out there are not there. And I think another thing that you said just before is people don't put up with the old way of coaching where you're yelling, screaming, literally getting kicked in the butt, or someone's grabbing your face mask, screaming at you and making you roll around on the ground and all that sort of thing. Kids today definitely don't put up with that, and they'll quit in a heartbeat versus bucking up and not folding their tent in front of their other friends. And I remember many times where I had a foot up my butt and getting yelled at, and Mike Haight, what are you doing out there? Coach Fry said that to me a couple different times, but it feels good when you actually do something that they actually point you out to as well. And I had that at both places, especially at Iowa.
It's too bad that's happening. I think people are more aware of some of the safety risks, but I think sport is trying to get safer. You just have a whole world open to you through your phone that you can get lost in. We had video games and we had sports, and that's your choices. And
Exactly.
that's about it.
Exactly.
Now it's so many things I can get into.
Oh, yeah. The funny thing is, I'm sure each of you had bikes or maybe mini bikes, motorcycles. I had all those things, and we were outside all the time, and we were not necessarily looking for trouble, but that's usually what happened. Usually got in trouble for something, for not coming home on time or came in after dark or whatever, or you wrecked your bike or something. But kids today, they don't even leave the room. They just stay in there and play those video games, or they're on the computer. And the lack of being physical at all is hardly there. And you're seeing that with especially the younger kids, so that some kids are definitely overweight or they just have never physically lifted a weight. That was one thing in Dyersville. We had a weight room and it was a universal machine. After I got drafted, I donated an entire weight room for them at Dyersville Beckman. You can buy a lot of free weights for $50,000 and got rid of that stupid universal machine, which was way older than I ever was, probably older than I am now. Kids absolutely love that. And of course, that also drives people to, hey, I want to be involved, or maybe I just want to lift weights. I don't know. A lot of basketball coaches don't seem to think that's a good thing because it might make them lose their touch on that all important shot. But I got chewed out for doing that too, by the way, for lifting too much weight.
Where'd you get in trouble with? A high school coach?
Yeah, one of my coaches at Dyersville Beckman, I got in trouble because I was lifting weights. And we were done with practice. And he said, Mike, where you going? Because I was heading not to the locker room. I said, I'm heading to the weight room. He looked at me. He threw the board that clips the plays and all that stuff. He threw it on the ground. It flew all over the place. He started jumping up and down. And I go, wow. Clearly, he does not approve of weightlifting. Just walked away and went to the weight room. That was about the end of that.
And did you enjoy basketball more or football more?
Oh, football more. I was crappy. I usually fouled out by halftime, so I definitely was probably more aggressive than what you should be. Not to mention, too many people stopped in front of me and I ran them over. So that's definitely a foul.
There was a game called lacrosse that sounded like basketball, but you give them a stick and you can hit people that run around. It was like, that maybe
Yeah.
was my game. I think I missed out on that part.
Yeah. Are they even doing that in the state of Iowa yet? I know they are doing soccer, which I absolutely love that too. Not quite as physical, but I've seen a couple of my daughters that are in there and they are just beating each other up in soccer. So there's a little bit of physicality in that as well.
Definitely. Let's talk about your recruiting and when and how that started and who you were looking at.
I got my first recruitment letter when I was in 10th grade. I got it from one of the coaches that was under Hayden Fry, Del Miller. And I didn't know who he was, but he was one of the younger coaches at that time. And I think he was probably one of the assistant coaches, but he probably was also recruiting coordinator as well. They asked me if I wanted to come to Iowa to do a visit. And I wrote back at that time, I'm only in 10th grade. I got several more years before I'd be ready to do that. And they said, we'll wait that long. Long story short, when it came down to getting a scholarship at Iowa, I credit my head coach, Terry Sherbring, for reaching out and talking to Coach Fry because they were still nosing around at that time. I think I was on their secondary list, but they ended up extending a scholarship out to me primarily because of that man who reached out and nudged him, and I got a scholarship. And otherwise, I think I probably would have been asked to walk on. And according to my dad, and not necessarily my mom, but if you don't get a scholarship, you're not going to college. You're going to stay at home and be a truck driver, be a sewer rat, like I mentioned before, or shoveling shit. One of the three. It was very obvious to me what I wanted to do is go to college and play football. Totally different for the NFL. I had no clue I was going to go to it. I didn't believe, I didn't have a dream. I never really had anything about the NFL, but going to Iowa was a big deal. The three big schools that actually offered me scholarships, number one, again, was Iowa, Missouri, and then, believe it or not, Oregon. I don't know where the hell that one came out of. I didn't even know there was a state named Oregon. I was like one of those New York reporters. I had no clue where the hell Oregon was. I said, there's no way I'm going to go over there. I was a homebody. We hardly ever went out of the county of Dubuque, where Dyersville is located, much less the state of Iowa. And it was a no-brainer to go to the University of Iowa. And I thank God, number one, for Terry Sherbring making that phone call that ultimately got me there. And then, of course, number two is Coach Fry, who actually was the man that extended it over the phone to me and that same day. And I think it was Coach Bill Brazier actually was the one that he sent out and signed me on the signing date. Nothing but great memories from that date right till the last day I wore a uniform for them. And University of Iowa was great.
And were they looking at you to play tight end, or did you have a chance to play defense as well?
No, actually, they recruited me as a defensive end, believe it or not. One of Coach Fry's best friends, Howard Sissel, was still coaching there in the 80s or early 80, I guess 79 and 80 is when they were first there. He quit coaching and went into the lucrative business of insurance. He recruited a couple former Iowa football players to join him, and they all became multimillionaires as well. Long story short, the new defensive end coach didn't want me to be a defensive end. I was moved to tight end because that was probably the other position that I played the most at Dyersville Beckman. When I got to Iowa, the first year I was a tight end and didn't break into the starting lineup, nor was I ready for it at that time. My eyes opened up quite a bit to see what kind of level going from high school to college was a major eye opener when you are the biggest guy on the team at 215 pounds. And then now all of a sudden there's guys like Ron Hallstrom who are 330 pounds, and there were a bunch of them. So I was no longer the big man on campus. I was just one of the peewees. And Andre Tippett was one of the guys who introduced me to the turf field quite a few times by picking me up and throwing me on my head numerous times as a tight end. Thank you, Andre. We met quite a few times in the NFL because the New York Jets were in the same division as them. So I think I exacted a little bit of revenge against him. He may or may not remember that nor comment on it, but he was an unbelievable player. And when you say Iowa and defense, usually he's at the top along with Larry Station and actually, my brother was absolutely awesome defensive lineman there too, and he was a two-time All-American, three-time All-Big Ten, and co-captain twice. So there's not too many people have done that many things. My years at Iowa were absolutely unbelievably great, except for being on the scout team the first 2 years. But Dave, he'd probably say that same thing, but he was 10 times the player I ever was. I was actually on the scout team my first year as a tight end. They decided to move a couple other people to tight end, John Alt being one after my freshman year. So they moved him to tight end. He played tight end and started. And then I think they also moved Jonathan Hayes to tight end. Where was Mike Haight going to go? Offensive lineman? Yes, sir. John Hayes would tell you that I didn't have hands and I couldn't catch a ball to save my life, which is probably true. But going to offensive line, I went back to my dorm, called up my dad and mom and said, I'm coming home. I'm done. There's no way in hell I'm going to play offensive line. I'll never play because being that small with Ron Hallstrom being 330, there was absolutely no way I was going to be able to do that. Again, my dad, with his infinite wisdom, had a heart-to-heart talk with me. He basically said, you know what? You're not going to blow this opportunity. You have a full ride scholarship. Get your education. If you don't play, you don't play. But if you decide that you're quitting all by yourself, you can come back this way. You can become a truck driver, a sewer rat, or shovel shit for the rest of your life. Or you can stay there and gut it out and see what happens. Needless to say, I think I made the right choice because a 215-pound tight end who became a first-round draft pick in the NFL and becoming offensive lineman of the year of the entire Big Ten. And I think we had 10, all our seniors that were starters were the most valuable players, so it wasn't one. We were all co-MVPs. Every one of us got that awarded to us. So going from a small town peewee to going to that level, NFL doesn't even compare to that. University of Iowa, 5 years, most unbelievable time of my life. And I can honestly say my wife's time because she came down to live close by me. And we eventually got married right before my senior year, before we went to the Rose Bowl. And I was married. So that was not a common thing either.
All right, team, listen up. There's a national blood shortage. Big Ten schools, how do we get students, fans, alumni to donate? Hit me. Oh, give them merch. Not quite like that. Who can beat it? Chance of the President's Suite? Classy. Campus concert! Keep the ideas coming, team! Don't let your school get one up! Save lives and help win your school $1 million! Hey, whose hand is that?
Hi, I'm Hayden, and I was the kid captain for the Ohio State game.
Hayden's story takes us back to 2016. She was diagnosed with ALL, which is a kind of leukemia. Hayden needed transfusions, platelets during her stay here at the university. 2.5 years wreaked havoc on her blood and on her body.
The blood donations is important because we're having college kids that could be doing so many other things with the college life, giving blood to random people they probably will never see or hear from again in their lives. But while doing that, they're doing so much good in people's lives, and I am a true form of what blood donations can do for someone.
So you're 215, you just get moved to tackle. You're not thinking about playing in the NFL. You're at Iowa. You're trying to stop from going home to work a labor job.
Yep.
Was it just the farm mindset of just getting up every day and getting to work, or what got you there? What was your mindset what allowed you to be successful like that? That you weren't working towards a huge goal. I guess playing was part of it, right?
Yeah. Again, I had no idea nor goal of ever going to the NFL. It just happened. And maybe the way that ended, I was there 7 years. Well over half the people that go into the NFL never make it past their third year. And I made it 7, so I doubled that time. I honestly thought I was going to play 15 years, but my neck got shortened. I have a 5-level fusion in my neck, and both of my knees have been hyperextended, and my right elbow has been hyperextended multiple times. But those are only a few of the injuries I've had. I've had cracked ribs, and believe me, they're not too shy about saying, hey, rub some dirt on it and get back out there. Rub dirt on it. Or they'd be kind enough to shoot you up with some sort of drug to kill the pain or whatever. Can't say that was probably good for me where I am today as a 63-year-old former offensive lineman. I got plenty of aches and pains every day. But the key question, everybody said, would you do it again? There's no hesitation. I would do it again because it's the chance of a lifetime. People dream about doing something like this as a young kid, as a high school player, as a college player. People want to have that opportunity. And I come from a small town of, at that time, I think it was just a little over 3,000. Believe it or not, we had another kid in the same town by the name of Bruce Klosterman. He also was drafted in the NFL. He went a whole different route. He went to Iowa State, then he tried to come to Iowa. He couldn't fit in. He eventually went to South Dakota, had an absolutely great 2 or 3 years there. He ended up getting drafted, I think, in the 5th round to the Denver Broncos. So we had 2 kids from the same town who played on the same team. So per capita at that time, Dyersville was the place to come from if you wanted to be in the NFL, if you're in the state of Iowa. But that's been passed a little bit now. I think Parkersburg, with numerous guys that were from that town, have been in the NFL, probably all at the same time again. So being at the right place at the right time definitely helps. Not getting too injured also helps. And having a life that you grew up where I think you mentioned before about being a farm kid originally when I was very young, and having a father and a mother who loved us dearly, worked their butts off, never took vacations, always hung out with us. We were the first things to take care of. I needed to prove something not only to myself, but to them. And of course, the state of Iowa, where I'm from, if they stop recruiting Iowa players from the state of Iowa, it's going to go downhill real fast. And you can see all the Iowa kids on that team, whether they're walking on, whether they get a scholarship, or they get a partial scholarship, or they can even be a ball boy, whatever. It's great to be from Iowa. And I didn't even know I had a dream about NFL, but being a football player with the experiences that I had, which most were positive, you just got to look at the positive things, but you also have to work hard at it. Yeah, I was never a gifted athlete. My brother was. Again, he was 10 times the player I ever was, and he just could do things so easy. I had to work at it, and I had to work at it all the way through, even in the NFL, for that special recipe for the Iowa boy from Dyersville.
I think everyone thinks like everybody's paths are so linear, right? They start here and they go straight up and get to where they are. To hear you go play the tight end for a bit, not fit in there or get other guys come in and take over that position, and then you work yourself into where you ultimately end up super successful. So I think that's a great point for people to take away. They try to talk to kids these days about, oh, what do we do to get you into these positions and that. It's not hardly ever a linear thing where you're just like, you go from 0 to 100. Talk about some on-field memories you have at Iowa and maybe some Coach Fry memories as well, if you have any of those.
Coach Fry, he was a great man. I often compare him to being my second father. Number one, for giving me a chance. And then number two, learning so much Haydenisms from him that you snicker when you hear about him or when he says them to you. But after the fact, you go, that old man was right. What the hell? You just can't hardly believe it. He even admits that when he was in school, he was a troublemaker and a show off and all that sort of thing. One time he actually, I don't know if you ever heard this or not, but I was one of the few players at Iowa to have a real motorcycle. I drove it to class. I did it everything, even during the winter. I didn't care. I was going to take that motorcycle. I wasn't going to ride no damn cam bus. We usually had 2 or 3 guys on there too, because there's a bunch of lazy bastards on the team that were my friends. Long story short, Coach Fry says, Mike, you got to be careful out there with that motorcycle. I don't know if you ever noticed my teeth. And then he makes a big wide smile with his teeth. And I look at him, I go, they look good to me. What do you mean? What's wrong with your teeth? And he says, do you know what an Indian motorcycle is? And I go, yeah, it's a type of motorcycle like a Harley. It's a big competitor of theirs. He said, I had an Indian motorcycle when I was growing up, and I was a show off. Oh, God, where's this going to go? He says, I got up on my motorcycle, and I'm going down the road about 50, 60 miles an hour, and I stood up on the seat, and I'm riding my motorcycle, and sure as shit, I hit a rock in the road. I went flying, landed right on my face. My teeth were all crooked and all that. What the? Where the hell did that come from? Oh my God, it was unbelievable. I'm going, did this really happen? Did I have a dream? No, he really did say that to me, but he had so many things. That was a personal one because he actually said that to me.
Ever heard that story?
He majored in psychology, so he would tell you certain things to get you to do something else. He used to, God, this really pissed us off. We were really mad. It was our senior year, and we were number 1 in the country at that time. And he says something to the effect that, man, that was the worst practice I've ever seen in my entire career as a football coach. It was not a good practice. Everybody's got 10 extra cross fields. Oh my God, everybody was going, what the hell was he watching? We were out there just hitting on everything, catching passes, making the right blocks, tackling the right people, all that sort of thing. Man, we're going to go an extra hour tomorrow just because of that. The next day, the coaches killed us. People were dropping the ball. They were fumbling. They were dropping passes. Chuck was tripping. The snap was off. The ball was on the ground. None of us could do anything right. And at the very end, he brings us all in. Remember, this is an hour longer practice, and they just beat the crap out of us. And then he comes in, man, that was the best practice I've ever had in my entire coaching career. He just messed with our minds like, oh, God. Every one of us just wanted to kill him. But the good thing is we didn't have to do any more cross fields or 10 more on top of it. But he used to just mess with your mind to get you to practice harder, to go harder. He felt sorry. He was not approving of your conduct and your practicing or your abilities. And holy shit, I'm not kidding you. Everybody just beat everybody up that particular practice. And to have him say that was the best practice ever, just the day before, he says that was the worst practice ever. Hap Peterson and some of those guys would be able to tell you that we were just absolutely going nuts, knowing full well he just pulled one on us. And he's famous for stuff like that. He just knew how to mess with your mind. Same situation with Michigan. They supposedly went in there and put up butcher paper up over the top of all the pink walls. Remember, the visitors' room is all pink. Everything was pink. He got them worried more about the stupid pink locker room than playing us. Of course, he thinks he's in Bo's mind on that. And then he did all kinds of stuff like that. He's messing with your mind. But usually, thank God for us, it was in a good way. And it usually worked real well. Plus, we didn't have to run those cross fields.
The punishments always stick, right?
Oh,
How
yeah.
hard was it to focus when you guys were top of the nation or you were highly ranked? Like, how hard was that, or what was that like to like go to practice and be like, oh wow, could be the best team in the country? Was that even on your minds, or you guys were oblivious, or what was that like?
He wanted little or no conversations to happen with the reporters during those times. It was kept very short. I think he limited it to maybe just us 5 captains, because it was Ronnie, myself, Chuck, Hap Peterson, Larry Station, and I think maybe a handful of other people. But another Haydenism is he did not want to put up any type of locker room newspaper articles where it says, oh, no problem, we're going to kick your butt and we're looking past them. We're going to play against Ohio State the next week and we're going to kick their butts. In his mind, you do not want that clickbait, which back then there was no such thing as clickbait, but he did not want those type of articles hanging up to be easy targets against us, where they could come in and say, Mike Haight said that he's going to kick whatever his name was all over the field, or the defensive lineman was going to go out and kill I'm trying to remember the quarterback during that time.
Jim Harbaugh?
Yes, but he was calling timeout all the time, saying it was too loud at Kinnick. Does that sound familiar after the last 3 or 4 games? Everybody's complaining about how horrendous. Even when I was playing in the NFL, everybody that I found out that was on a different Big Ten team or that actually played in Kinnick, they hated Kinnick because the players were literally bombarded by how close the fans were screaming, yelling, whether it's profanities or maybe they were calling out their names too. Who knows? But I know a lot of that stuff goes on in the NFL too. But evidently that's relentless from the other teams when they hear that they're coming to play at Iowa. Another thing besides the locker room wall material, we also had special, how do I say this, crowd noise. That's what it was. Someone must have taped our games or something, but they had that thing cranked up to 1,000 decibels. We couldn't even hear ourselves in the huddle, probably just like the other teams, but he wanted us to be ready for any and all things that might happen because, of course, we played Ohio State up there. It was raining, number one, but also number two, they ended up beating us, and they're always loud. But that was another thing that he did, was had this crowd noise just blasting the entire practice. So it was during, even when you were running cross fields, he was making you do that as well. So had to put up with stuff like that. He was trying any and all tricks he could do to get us ready.
We had that too. I remember that. For certain games, he'd bring that out. When we were in the bubble,
We had the bubble for our senior year in '85. Before that, we were literally practicing up in the rec building above the football locker rooms,
Yeah.
practicing and on hard surface with tennis shoes on. Oh my God, it's not fun doing it on turf, much less doing it on a hard surface up there where you're wearing tennis shoes and it's practice, you're going pretty fast, at least 85%.
Those days are always fun, right? Because you're like, okay, we're going half speed, and you're like, it starts out slow, and then someone gets fired up to someone else, and then it ratchets up, right?
Shirts are being ripped off, or tempers usually flying with a few choice words.
My other favorite new question is, did you talk a lot of trash?
I never did. I don't believe in that, even in the NFL. I'd say some of the guys that I played at in the NFL were the worst. They were trash talking you, your mother, your wife, the quarterback. He's going to do something to the quarterback you wouldn't do to any person on the earth, and calling you names and all that sort of crap. All I'd do is just play the game and kick his ass anyway. So why do you need to be bringing that every single play? I don't know. It didn't rattle me, but it pissed me off actually more. And usually when I was pissed off, I usually did pretty damn good. It didn't work for him against me, at least. I stayed away from that. I didn't think it was worth trying to get someone else pissed off. Usually, one of the things I've learned, especially in the NFL, is one of my last offensive line coaches, Larry Bechtel at the Jets. His famous saying was, kill or be killed. That's all he would say to you. Haight, get out there and kill or be killed. Yeah, I knew what he wanted then. Go out there and kick ass.
I feel like NFL line coaches are a special breed of their own too, aren't they?
Some of them are outstanding. They're unbelievable good coaches. They know how to call the game. They know how to teach you the little things, like watching how people's legs are lined up or their hands or their head. What are they doing? I had to play against the Fridge's little brother who was at the Browns for years and years. He was a terror. I had some of my best games because I saw some telltales on him that I knew if his feet were this way, I knew where he was going. So was I cheating? No, I just knew what he was going to do before the game. And I actually had pretty good games against him. And if you are taught little things like that versus some other goofy things that they try to teach, I had one coach who said, man, you got to have your toolbox out there. Take that out of the toolbox next time. Trip them with your toe. You're an NFL coach trying to teach guys that are going against Bruce Smith, going against some of these unbelievable, outstanding defensive ends, outside linebackers, Bruce Smith. I'm just saying him because we played twice a year against him. I had to play against him all the time. Holy shit. You did not want him to get around the corner because he was going to get your quarterback and you were going to probably be fired by the end of the game, if not on the way home or on the plane ride. He helped us put our hands, how to do our feet, how to do the step, how to do the slide, where you don't want to bring your feet together. Or when you kick back, if you're a left tackle, you kick back with your left foot, and then you drag your right foot. The reason why? Because if you step, you might bring it all the way to your other foot, and then that guy can club you to the inside, and he's got the quarterback right now. Stuff like that. And I watch that when I'm watching football, even the last couple of weekends, to see if those guys are being trained like that. And for the most part, they are. I honestly pretty much watch just the offensive line for Iowa. So clearly, Ferentz is still involved in the offensive lineman stuff. He's one of the gurus of it. And he learned it from Joe Moore, who's no longer alive, but he was his mentor from Pittsburgh or Pitt. And that's where Ferentz actually was, believe it or not, before he came to Iowa. And I owe a lot to that man too, just for teaching me. I just didn't want to get beat. I wanted to do well and preferably kick ass. And I had to use those techniques, and you better learn them and you better keep doing them.
So did you feel like at some point, like you're getting the mechanics down, you're starting to gain weight or put on muscle? When did it really start to feel like, okay, I can be a good lineman? Was it like 1 year, 2 years in? When did you really feel like I got this down?
Of course, I'm not counting the first year at all because I was a tight end and I got my butt kicked by Andre Tippett and Mark Bortz most of the time. That's a nightmare. So let's just forget about that. The next year, I was still weighing maybe about 220, going against Mark Bortz again, Dave Brown, Jim Pecar, a bunch of huge linebackers like Todd Simonson. And oh my God, there were some huge boys over there. They were gigantic. They were just as big as I was, if not bigger. And I had to go up on them and block them and everything else without getting my head knocked off. And I learned a lot, but I wasn't getting taught much because I was on the scout team.
Kittle?
Bruce Kittle, he was a GA. for 1 year there. And then so was Sam Palladino and a few other guys. But having Ferentz coach you is a huge situation where he teaches you, again, how to use your hands, keep your head back. If you get your head in there, you're probably going to be in trouble. I'm sure if you ever go to one of those practices, you can say, your head back, butt down, slide. I just have to laugh every time I hear that stuff. I haven't heard it enough, put it that way, recently at least. But yeah, Ferentz was an absolute technician, and he also learned how to block special defenses with scoop blocking versus, I got that guy and you got that guy. 1-on-1, we're just going to block it that way. The way they were designing defenses back then, especially Michigan State, who learned it from the Bears. There was a bear defense where they usually have the 3 inside guys covered, and then they usually had 2 guys on the tight end side, one over the tight end, one outside, and then they had another guy outside the tackle. So there's way more guys standing there than the 5 linemen, and you had to figure out how to block all them. When they say 5 guys matched up with the offensive linemen, it's easy to figure that out. But when you've got 6, 7, and sometimes 8, you better know who you're blocking. And it usually involved scoop blocking, which was brand new to Iowa in 81. And of course, I started learning it probably more so in 82 and 83 when I actually moved up in the line and actually got some tutelage from Ferentz. He knew his stuff.
We were talking about Bruce Smith. I'm curious, walk us through just trying to what you would do to block him or how you would try to slow him down. And then talk about other people that were your toughest opponents to go against, guys that you were just like, wow, that's a rough day to go against them all day.
Probably the first one I'll say is Andre Tippett. When I was playing him, mostly I was left guard, and he's usually on the right side. So guess what? I got to trap him all the time. I pull from the left side over to the right, and either I'm kicking him out, or if he's trying to stop me from doing that, then I would hook him, and then the tackle filing behind me would bounce it outside, and we'd run for yardage. So I was pretty good at that, and I knew how to do it. But the thing, that guy he's a 3-time black belt, but he knew how to stop you. And basically how to do that is get below your head, and then he'd lift his front arm up and jack you underneath the chin. Usually you go straight up when that happens, and he's got you in the hole. There's no room to run. And the guy that's behind you is going to run into the back of you as well, and so is the running back. So one of the bad things I can say about being an offensive lineman is the possible neck injuries, especially if you were a trapper, and that's what I was. I knew how to get down low, but that usually meant I had to put my head down, and that's why I had a 5-level fusion. My neck is totally messed up today. You only have 7 levels, and I have 5 of them fused together. So that tells you a little bit. All my nerves and everything down into both my hands and both my feet and legs are numb most of the time because all that stuff is crunched and now fused together, and you just lose the feeling. Some other guys I played against quite a bit. Redskins, we were always playing against them. They had some big boys over there. Dave Butts, he was a huge nose guard, had some absolutely awesome defensive linemen there. Defensive ends were outstanding. Wilbur Marshall, oh my God, he was a good guy. He was a great guy, and he was an absolutely awesome outside linebacker. I still love him. I don't know where he's at anymore. My last year was with the Redskins. And then let's see. Oh, of course, I played against Howie Long quite a few times. And a lot of people ask me, well, was he a trash talker? I said, absolutely not. He didn't say anything. Matter of fact, if a play where you smashed him and put him on the ground, he'd come up to you and say, nice play. He'd actually say that to you. Most guys don't say that. They usually say something a lot more foul than that. There's a huge guy down in San Diego I played against all the time. The Indianapolis Colts, I had to play against 2 guys down there. Sam Clancy, inside. No, he was outside, I think. Usually outside tackle. But there was a huge defensive guy, black guy. I think his number was 78 for the Indianapolis Colts defense. He was 6'8", probably weighed about 340 pounds. I went up to 295 from 275. I'm going against a guy that's 6'8", 340 or 50 or 60 pounds, and I was 6'4", 295. I'm trying to block him. And number one thing you got to do is get your hands inside on them, not outside, because you're going to get called for holding or you're going to miss them or something. I wasn't even touching his chest. His arms are so long that he's already has the backside of my jersey on the backside of both of my shoulders. That's how big these guys are. They're built like Sasquatches. They had, oh my God, they're huge. It was
Is it
unbelievable.
John Hand?
John Hand, he was absolutely unbelievable. Another one, outstanding. He's unfortunately has left the earth at this point, but he was with the Eagles all the time. He was there for, I don't know, 15 years. Then I think he played 3 more years at the Green Bay Packers.
Reggie White?
Reggie?
Reggie, unbelievable. That man knew how to do everything. He could hip toss, he could smash you, he could bull rush, he could arm over you. He wasn't as tall as like John Hand. He's maybe, I don't know, maybe 6'5", but he had really long arms too, so he could grab the back of your jersey. Offensive linemen do not want their jerseys grabbed at all for multiple reasons, but that usually means you're going to get your ass beat. He was unbelievable. And he was a great guy. He was another one like Howie Long that he was not a trash talker, but most of the guys on the Eagles were, at least when I played them. Let's see, another team, Patriots. That was with good old Andre. But Buffalo Bills, they had outstanding. And that's where Bruce Smith, we played him twice a year again. Man, he was a one-man wrecking machine. He was maybe 6'5", but he had long-ass arms, stronger than a bull. And he could bull rush. He could do a one-arm. Unfortunately, we played him in the winter. So you can imagine an open hand slap on your arm when it's freezing out and snow on the sidelines and everything else up there in Buffalo. Holy shit. I hated that. And all those guys that were on that team, Daryl Talley, and oh man, they are some absolutely unbelievable players. But when you play in the NFL, what I said earlier, I think going from high school to college is like a huge jump. But going from college to the pros is like jumping from kindergarten to college. That's how big of a difference. The quality, the type of guys, these guys are basically monsters that are absolutely awesome. And to even think that I was in there for 7 years, getting my head banged in and hopefully banging some heads back, I was there 7 years. And that's, like I said before, over twice as long as most players actually make it in the NFL. And I came out somewhat okay, but I do have 2 new knees. Titanium, of course. Just got them done a year ago, both pretty much at the same time. And then, of course, my neck and a whole host of other aches and pains. You can get that same feeling definitely in college as well. But when you do all 3 of them together, oh my God, I'm surprised I'm walking and playing with my grandkids. I got 5 grandkids and I'm about to have my 6th. And my son is going to have a baby boy to carry on the Haight name.
Wow.
Going to carry on the legacy. So excited.
Congrats. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, they're due, I think, this next weekend or close to it, November 3rd. And he's definitely a boy, but they won't tell us the name. So there's going to be some spankings going on when that baby's born. My brother had daughters, so unfortunately that lineage on his side isn't going to carry forward, but my son is having a son, so my dad, old Ron Haight, can smile way up there and say, hey, still got something going on with the Haight boys.
That's great. At what point did the linemen start taping the jerseys? And do you have any superstitions that you had like when you were playing?
Quirks, I probably had this throughout college and in the pros. I always tried to do the same thing in order all the time by getting dressed, doing my lower half, doing the upper half, getting my helmet last. But the hardest part was taping. We used to use, dare I say it, because now it's going to be online, carpet tape. We put carpet tape on your pads, and then when you put your shirt over it, you smooth it all out. So There is no grabbing going on. There is no grabbing. So the only place they could grab you is right here on your chest or back here underneath your arm. So those knuckle draggers that I was saying before, they didn't have a problem because they could reach the back of you right now. But anybody else that you're going against that want to grab something, you better not be wearing any elbow pads or anything like that either. I remember one, I think it's actually 2 or 3 games, John Alt had, I think he broke a bone in his hand, so he had a club for a hand. You didn't even have fingers, it was a club. And some of the guys that he was going against were like trying to hammer his clubbed hand, and he was not real happy about that when they did. So that motivated him a little bit. That's the size they ordered. They were small, literally kid size, and you'd stretch them out so that they were just literally so tight on you that I'm really surprised we could breathe, put it that way. And then have a helmet on your head. And then most of the time we were in black, as you guys know. It's hard to breathe. And you get hotter than all heck too, for that matter. I taught a lot of the guys in the NFL. That's what we did at Iowa. So some of them knew it. Most of them did it because I taught them how to do it.
You introduced it? Nice.
Yeah, they enjoyed it. But of course, someone got creative and brought in silicone and then sprayed our jerseys. So now, if they didn't quite get hooked on you, they were going to slide their hands right off. And then we got busted a couple times where we had to change our jerseys right on the field because a couple of us had silicone sprayed on us. And that probably wasn't a cool part, but we got by with it a few times.
I thought I remember some spray.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, even at Iowa, I think.
We
But I didn't
There's
know
all
if it was
sorts of tricks,
silicone or
right?
if it
Yeah,
was like
it was like-
sticky.
Oh, you learn tricks like
Right.
crazy.
It was
If
hard.
you, way my buddy Hap Peterson says, if you're not cheating, you're not trying.
Yeah, I do remember like how impressive it was because it was literally like it was just pasted on because it was like they were super tight, super stuck
Like-
on. It was not going anywhere. It was like literally just big enough to fit here, and yeah, it was,
Yes.
there was no extra at all.
Yeah, nowadays they hardly wear even peanut shells as an offensive lineman. The set of pads I had were really heavily padded and stuff because I was a trapping guard. I needed that because my shoulders and everything are about falling off right now, but they don't do that much trapping anymore. So it's not quite as bad. I would say that the guys that need that are for sure the running backs and probably the linebackers and DBs because if they're not using their helmet, they're probably using their shoulder pads. So that's the only way they can protect themselves.
Let's jump into your brother. What's the age difference between you guys?
My brother Dave is 3 years younger than me. He's basically my number one fan, but in the opposite, I'm his number one fan because we just cheered for each other. My brother Dave was excelling in high school and he was recruited by, I think he actually had 30 different schools offer him a full ride scholarship throughout the country versus my 3, which were Iowa State didn't even offer me a scholarship. They said I could walk on, but that they didn't really want to do that either, for that matter, from what I understand. And Missouri, and again, the Oregon Ducks. Dave got everything, all Midwest, East Coast, West Coast. He could have went everywhere. I think he only took 2 visits. Iowa State, which of course I was in my 3rd year because he's 3 years younger than me. I was not a starter yet at that point. It was at Iowa State. And of course, all the recruits that day were out in the middle of the field at Iowa State. And it's unbelievable. All the coaches saw my brother out in the middle of the field and they're just saying stuff under their breath, probably more than just under their breath. But of course, my dad was wearing his Iowa jacket out in the middle of Iowa State when he's being recruited, which that probably slapped a few people's face right there. But until Dave committed, that was a long year. My 3rd year between me and Vince was always saying, you know what, Mike, you could always join your brother at Iowa State if that's the way it's going to be around here. If you don't get any better, that's where you're going to go. Oh, I go, oh, thanks, coach. That's motivated me. Not really, but that's what he did say a couple times. But I think he only did those 2 visits and that was it. And he undoubtedly became a Iowa Hawkeye. And evidently his first couple of years were about as rough as it was for me because he was not a big guy either. He may have been 230 versus 215 like me. And again, at that time, we had the big boys like John Alt and Joey Lavellis and a few of those guys that were well over 300 pounds. And he was a nose guard. It's not fun being a nose guard at any level, even in high school, I think, because you're going to get nailed by 2 or 3 people all the time, especially your knees, especially your back, especially your hips. I did it a little bit when I was in high school, and needless to say, that was not one place I wanted to really go to. I played linebacker, I played defensive end, and then I also started the entire time as tight end. Dave came to Iowa, and after my success in my junior and senior year, 4th and 5th year, he got his opportunity to move up, and he did really well. He got all Big Ten his final 3 years. He stayed an extra year like I did, so he had 5 years as well. In his 4th year at the end of the season, he was top 3 players defensively in the nation. Well, I appreciate what you guys have been doing, especially inviting a lowlife like me.
You are too humble.
Yeah.
You are one of the legends of Iowa football. It's great to have you on. Thanks for coming.
Thank you both.